Life, in its seemingly peaceful routine, has a strange ability to deceive us. It was just another ordinary afternoon, one of those in which the sky carried the same grayish tone as always, mixed with a cold wind that cut through the narrow streets of the city. The noise of cars, the rhythmic sound of hurried footsteps on the wet asphalt, the fragmented conversations of strangers passing by, all of it seemed so trivial that it could easily be forgotten the very next moment. But on that afternoon, something would happen, something that would forever change the way I looked at the world. I walked absent-mindedly, my hands shoved into the pockets of my coat, my body slightly leaning forward, trying to shield myself from the gusts of wind sweeping through the street. There was no rush in my steps, but there was no calm either. It was that automatic kind of walk, as if each step was given out of habit rather than awareness. My eyes wandered across the shop windows, but my mind was elsewhere, drowning in the petty problems of everyday life. Unpaid bills, a phone call I kept postponing, memories I desperately tried to silence. And it was exactly in that moment, in that vulnerable state of distraction, that I felt a gaze cut through me. It wasn't a common sensation. It was as if someone had torn apart the invisible veil of safety I carried around myself. My instincts, usually asleep, woke up in a jolt. I turned my head slightly, and that's when I saw her. She was there, standing on the opposite corner, staring directly at me. She seemed out of place in that setting. Her clothes were simple, yet something about them felt old, out of time, as if they didn't belong to that year, that city, that moment. Her hair, tied carelessly, swayed with the wind, and her eyes, oh, her eyes, they weren't just ordinary eyes. There was an intensity in them that made me feel naked, exposed, as if all my secrets, even the ones I hid from myself, were reflected there, mirrored in that unsettling gaze. I'm not sure when she began to approach me. I only realized it when she was already just a few steps away. My heart raced in my chest, and my breath lost its rhythm. My palms sweated inside my pockets, despite the biting cold. Something was profoundly wrong in that moment, and yet there was also a strange sense that I needed to hear what she had to say. The woman stopped right in front of me. Her face was marked by exhaustion, as if she had lived 1,000 lives in one. Her lips, trembling slightly, parted slowly, and what came out of her mouth was not a casual remark, nor a simple request. It was a sentence, a warning, heavy and urgent. Run. Run before it's too late. The words, spoken softly but firmly, pierced through me like knives. My first reaction was disbelief. I blinked, confused, not sure if I had heard correctly. The street around me carried on with its cruel normality, the street vendor shouting his offer of roasted chestnuts, the impatient honk of a car, a dog barking in the distance. But for me, everything went silent. Only that phrase echoed inside my skull. What do you mean? I tried to ask, but my voice came out broken, barely audible. She just looked at me for a moment, with a silent pain carved into her expression. It was as though she carried the weight of something terrible, something I could not yet comprehend. Her tear-filled eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I had the disturbing feeling that she knew something about me that even I didn't. My body reacted before my mind could. A chill ran down my spine. Every hair on my body stood on end, and the air grew heavier, harder to breathe. My throat tightened, my mouth turned dry and bitter, and my legs trembled as if they were about to give way. And then the unthinkable happened. Just as I summoned the courage to take a step toward her, just as I raised my hand in a desperate attempt to grab her arm and demand answers, I realized that she was no longer there. Yes, just like that, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. I looked in every direction. People kept walking, indifferent, as if nothing unusual had happened. I asked myself if anyone else had seen her, if that woman was real or just a figment of my tired imagination. I turned, looked behind me, to the sides, even upward, as though I might catch her in some window above. But there was nothing. The emptiness where she had been, just silence, that was all that remained once the stranger vanished. Not the kind of silence one finds in an empty room, nor the peaceful quiet of night. No, this was the kind of silence that deafens, that presses against your ears until you question whether sound itself has abandoned you. The city carried on with its chaos. Cars still rushed past. The street vendor still called out his prices. People still spoke, laughed, and argued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But to me, it was as if the world had been muffled, drowned beneath a thick blanket of unreality. Every movement around me felt detached, too distant, too normal, while inside me a storm was rising. I stood frozen on that sidewalk, staring at the place where the woman had been only seconds earlier. My heart beat so violently that I could hear it thudding in my ears. My hands, clammy and trembling, fumbled for something solid, my bag, the wall beside me, anything that could anchor me to reality. But reality itself seemed to have slipped away. Did anyone else see her? The thought raced through my mind as I scanned the faces passing by. A mother tugging her child along, a man lighting a cigarette, a teenager lost in the glow of his phone. None of them seemed disturbed. None of them carried the trace of fear I felt, the weight of words that refused to leave my chest. To them, the world remained untouched. To me, it had shattered. Her voice lingered. Run before it's too late. The phrase repeated endlessly, louder than the honking horns, louder than the chatter of strangers, louder than my own breath. It wasn't advice. It wasn't a plea. It was a command, and commands like that do not come without reason. I turned in circles, desperate to spot her again, desperate for her to reappear and explain herself. The stranger couldn't simply dissolve into thin air. Yet, that was precisely what had happened. She had slipped away as though the earth itself had swallowed her. The air grew heavier with every breath I took. Shadows seemed longer, darker, sharper than they had only moments before. I could feel my instincts sharpening. Every footstep behind me felt suspicious. Every glance from a passerby lingered too long. My paranoia bloomed quickly, spreading like wildfire. I tried to rationalize. Perhaps she was a madwoman, disturbed and delusional. Perhaps she preyed on vulnerable strangers with cryptic warnings. Perhaps my mind, exhausted by days of stress, had conjured her out of thin air. And yet, none of these explanations satisfied the deep, gnawing certainty inside me, because I felt it, in my bones, in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. I began to walk again, but it was no longer the same automatic rhythm as before. My steps were quick, restless, my eyes darting in every direction. Every sound was amplified, every movement a potential threat. I was no longer simply moving through the city I was fleeing, though I didn't know from what. The silence followed me. It wasn't outside, it was inside, an oppressive quiet that made it impossible to hear my own thoughts clearly. My rational mind screamed that I was being absurd, that strangers disappear into crowds all the time, that warnings from mysterious women belong in fiction, not reality. But the deeper voice, the instinct I had ignored so often in life, whispered otherwise. It whispered that the countdown had already begun. As I turned into another street, I caught my reflection in a shop window. My face looked pale, my eyes wide and searching, my lips pressed into a thin line. I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who had seen a ghost. Perhaps I had. And then a new fear bloomed inside me, an unbearable question that sank its claws into my mind and refused to let go. What if she wasn't warning me about something distant, but something already here? That thought clung to me, more suffocating than the cold wind, more terrifying than the emptiness where she had stood. The silence after her warning was no longer just absence, it was anticipation. The quiet before the storm, the moment of stillness before everything comes undone. And, deep down, I knew, whatever it was already too close. The silence had followed me home. It clung to me like a second skin, like a shadow that refused to leave no matter how many lights I turned on, no matter how many noises I tried to create around me. The stranger's words were not just an echo anymore, they were a rhythm, pulsing in the background of everything I did. Run before it's too late. At first, I thought I could outwalk it, that if I moved quickly enough, if I busied myself with trivialities, the mail, the dishes, the endless scroll of meaningless news feeds, it would dissolve, fading like a half-remembered dream. But I was wrong. The warning had already seeded itself inside me, and like a poisonous vine, it grew stronger with each passing hour. That night, the city outside my window seemed different. The streetlights flickered as though conspiring, and the wind carried whispers I could not interpret. Even the ticking of the old clock in my living room, once a comfort in its predictability, now sounded like a countdown. I tried to sleep, but every time my eyes closed, I saw her again. The stranger, her weary face, her trembling lips, her eyes filled with unbearable knowledge. I heard her words in the dark, louder than my own heartbeat. I told myself it was absurd, that people like mystics, prophets of doom, lost souls existed in every city. But then, coincidences began to appear, small at first, harmless, almost laughable. The next morning, while pouring coffee, I dropped the mug. It shattered across the floor, the black liquid spreading like spilled ink. The time on the clock, 7:07, a palindrome, a mirror number. I wouldn't have noticed before, but now I did. Now, everything seemed like a sign. On my way to work, a car screeched too close to me at a crossing. The driver leaned on the horn, but his face never looked at me. For a moment, I was invisible. Or maybe I was already erased, already living on borrowed time. Run before it's too late. The paranoia thickened. My reflection in shop windows seemed delayed, almost as though it wasn't me staring back, but something slightly off. Something that had just enough difference to unsettle me. A man brushing past me on the sidewalk whispered something under his breath. Words I couldn't catch, but my mind twisted them until I swore they were the same words the stranger had spoken. At night, my apartment betrayed me. Doors creaked though, no one touched them. The fridge hummed too loudly, then cut off, as if silenced. Even the shadows seemed heavier, lingering in corners where light should have chased them away. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind, if stress and suggestion had warped my perception. But then came the undeniable. 3 days after the encounter, I found something strange in the mail. An envelope. No name, no return address, no stamps, just my door number written in a hurried scrawl. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No explanation, no signature, only a drawing. A crude sketch of a clock, its hands pointing to midnight. Beneath it, 2 words, too late. I sat frozen on my couch, the paper trembling in my hands. My chest tightened. It wasn't imagination anymore. It wasn't paranoia. Someone else was involved. Someone else knew. The stranger's warning had awakened a new part of me, an awareness, a paranoia, a dreadful clarity. Suddenly, I saw patterns everywhere. A black cat crossing the street wasn't just chance, it was omen. A phone call that dropped mid-sentence wasn't bad reception, it was interference. The flickering streetlight outside my window wasn't faulty wiring, it was a signal. My life, once ordinary, was now drenched in symbolism. The shadows around me weren't simply shadows, they were signs, warnings, reminders that something inevitable was approaching. But what was it? Death, betrayal, an accident, waiting to unfold? Or was it something larger, something I couldn't even begin to name? The human mind seeks patterns, it clings to them, desperate to make sense of chaos. And now mine had become a prisoner of patterns. Every coincidence was fate. Every silence was a message. Every shadow carried a secret. I found myself asking questions I had never dared before. Do we all live under warnings we ignore? Do strangers cross our paths every day, whispering truths we dismiss? Had she chosen me, or was I simply unlucky enough to hear what most people never do? The weight of it crushed me. I couldn't tell. My friends, they would laugh, roll their eyes, dismiss me as paranoid. I couldn't go to the police. What would I say? A woman told me to run and disappeared. They would write me off as unstable. So, I carried it alone. And the more I carried, the heavier it grew. By the end of the week, I had stopped sleeping altogether. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but every time I lay down, I was haunted by visions of clocks, of shadows lengthening, of the stranger's face staring into mine. My body shook with caffeine, my nerves raw from lack of rest, but I didn't dare close my eyes. Sleep felt dangerous, vulnerable. The city began to warp around me. Familiar streets seemed foreign, stretched, bent. People I passed daily looked at me too long, as though they knew. My co-workers whispered in corners, their voices dropping to silence when I entered the room. Even the sound of my own name felt strange, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. I began to write things down, every number, every coincidence, every strange occurrence. My notebook filled with scribbles, arrows, frantic sketches. Patterns emerged, at least to my fevered mind. Midnight circles, reflections, and always, the command, run. But where was I supposed to run to? How does one flee from something unseen, unnamed, inevitable? That question burned in me, unanswerable, until one night when I heard something outside my apartment door. A shuffle, a pause, a knock, soft, deliberate. I froze. My breath caught, my pulse thundered. Slowly, I crept toward the door, my bare feet silent on the cold floorboards. My hand hovered over the handle. The knock came again, softer this time, almost tender. And then, a voice. It wasn't hers, but it carried the same weight. It's almost time. The knock, the voice, the echo that left me frozen on the other side of the door. It's almost time. Those 3 words shattered any last illusion that this was merely paranoia. My blood went cold, and I pressed myself against the wall, unable to breathe. Whoever it was outside, they didn't knock again. They didn't demand entry. They simply left me with that sentence, hanging in the air like a noose. For a long time, I stood there, the silence buzzing louder than any sound could. Finally, I gathered enough courage to open the door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, fading into the distance, no shadows, retreating into corners. Just emptiness. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because my body simply refused. My mind had been hijacked by questions, obsessions, fears that stretched far beyond reason. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed answers. I needed to know who she was, why she had warned me, and what I was supposed to be running from. The search began clumsily. I retraced my steps, wandering back to the street where she first appeared. The city was unchanged. People hurried along, lost in their routines, unaware of the storm raging inside. I stood on the same corner where she had locked eyes with me, waiting, hoping she would appear again. She didn't, but I did notice something. Across the street was a small, nearly forgotten bookstore. Its sign was faded, its windows dusty, as though time had abandoned it. On a whim, or maybe guided by instinct, I went inside. The air smelled of old paper and mildew. The clerk barely looked up from his newspaper as I wandered the aisles. I wasn't searching for anything in particular, yet my hands seemed to move on their own, pulling down a cracked, leather-bound book from the highest shelf. The title, Whispers. Before the end, my chest tightened. I flipped through the pages, and my breath caught when I saw the words staring back at me. Stories, accounts, testimonies of people who had been approached by strangers with warnings. Run, leave, it's coming. The stories varied, but the pattern was always the same. A cryptic warning, a vanishing stranger, a life overturned. Some claimed they had escaped tragedies, a fire, an accident, even murder by heeding the warning. Others ignored it, and their stories ended abruptly, unfinished. Their fates implied in chilling brevity. I bought the book with shaking hands, the clerk barely glancing as he slid it into a paper bag. Back home, I devoured every page. The more I read, the more my fear grew, but alongside it, a strange sense of validation. I wasn't alone. This had happened before, many times. Too many people. But why me? The days blurred together as I dug deeper. I scoured online forums, dark corners of the internet where conspiracy theorists and occult enthusiasts gathered. To my shock, I found threads echoing the same experiences. The stranger phenomenon, they called it. Some dismissed it as mass hysteria. Others swore it was proof of something beyond our comprehension. Time travelers, spirits, divine messengers. The theories spiraled endlessly, but none gave me what I truly needed. Certainty. My notebook filled with new scribbles, new connections, dates, names, fragments of stories. A timeline began to form. Patterns emerged, and always, the warnings circled back to one thing, the idea of being too late. One night, my search led me to the library's archives. Dusty records, yellowed newspapers, forgotten obituaries. Hours slipped into darkness as I traced names from the book to real events, fires, collisions, vanishings. The coincidences piled higher until they no longer felt like coincidences at all. These were real people, real tragedies. And then, I found her. A newspaper clipping, dated 30 years ago. A grainy photograph of a woman who looked exactly like the stranger who had stopped me on the street. The headline, Local Woman Dies in Mysterious Accident. The article was short, vague. A car crash, no witnesses, no explanation for why she had been on that road at that hour. But her face, the same tired eyes, the same mouth trembling as if holding words she couldn't say, stared up at me from the page. My skin crawled. It was impossible. She couldn't be the same woman, unless she wasn't alive. The thought cracked something inside me. For days I couldn't focus. I jumped at every sound, every shadow. I started seeing her face in crowds, on buses, in shop windows. Each time, she vanished when I blinked. I had to know the truth. I tracked down the address listed in the article. An old house on the edge of the city. The neighborhood was dying, buildings boarded up, graffiti clawing at the walls. Her house was still standing, though barely, its paint peeled, its windows shattered, its yard overrun with weeds. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and abandonment. I moved cautiously, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet. Photographs still hung crooked on the walls, their images faded but recognizable. A young woman, smiling, a family gathered around a table, and then her, the stranger, alive, vibrant, holding a child in her arms. I felt dizzy, gripping the wall for balance. My heart hammered in my ears. Why was I here? What did I think I'd find? In the back room, I discovered boxes of belongings left to rot. Letters, journals, notebooks. I rifled through them with shaking hands, desperate for answers. And I found them scribbled in a journal with frantic handwriting. They come to me at night. Warnings, voices. They tell me to run, but from what? I don't know. I try to listen, but I can't escape it. I saw myself in the mirror today, but it wasn't me. It was older, tired, like I was looking at my future. I'm scared. If anyone finds this, know that I tried. I really tried. The entry ended there. I dropped the journal, my hands trembling violently. She had heard them too. She had been warned, just like me. And if the photograph in the newspaper was to be believed, she hadn't escaped. The realization crushed me. What if I was destined to follow her path? What if her warning wasn't to save me, but to condemn me to the same cycle she had lived? For the first time since the encounter, I wept, alone in that decaying house, surrounded by her ghost. I broke, the weight of inevitability pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. But then, in the corner of the room, I noticed something. A mirror, cracked and clouded with age. I stepped closer, drawn by some invisible force. My reflection stared back at me, but for just a flicker, for just a heartbeat. It wasn't me, it was her, and she mouthed the words without sound. It's almost time. The mirror shattered something inside me. Not the glass, though I half expected it to break under the weight of what I had seen but me. Her face. My face. No, our face. The stranger wasn't just warning me. She was me, or, rather, a version of me, older, broken, already consumed by the thing I could not yet name. For days afterward, I carried the reflection inside me like a scar. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury myself in work, in meaningless tasks, in the rhythm of normal life, but reality no longer held its shape. Conversations blurred into noise. Food lost its taste. Time bent and twisted, hours slipping by without sense. Every clock I passed became a weapon, its hands pointing not to time, but to doom. And always, the warning followed, run before it's too late. But from what and where could I go? I tried leaving the city, packed a bag one night, and drove until the highways blurred. But the signs followed me, billboards with cryptic messages, shadows that stretched too long across the asphalt, a radio announcer whose words twisted mid-sentence into "it's almost time." I pulled over, shaking, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The realization was unavoidable. I could not run, not from this, so I returned. If I couldn't flee, I would face it. Whatever it was. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. The air was heavy with the smell of rain, thunder grumbling in the distance. My apartment felt smaller than ever, its walls closing in as though suffocating me. I sat in the dark, the journal I had taken from her house open on my lap, its pages swimming with frantic handwriting. And then the knock again, 3 soft taps, deliberate, waiting. My chest tightened, but this time I didn't freeze. I stood, my legs trembling but determined. The hallway outside the door hummed with silence. My hand hovered over the handle, sweat dripping down my temple. Slowly, I opened it. No one, but on the floor a note. I bent down, my fingers shaking as I picked it up. The paper was damp from the humidity, the ink smudged but legible. The choice is yours, run or stay. But decide now. I stumbled back, my breath shallow, my vision spinning. Run or stay. The same command, but this time it wasn't a warning, it was a demand. I collapsed into the chair, the note clutched my chest. The walls seemed to pulse, the shadows alive, the ticking clock louder with every second. Midnight loomed closer. I could feel it not just on the clock, but in my body, in the marrow of my bones. And then came the sound, a low hum at first, vibrating through the floor, growing louder, deeper, until the very air trembled. The lights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the faint glow of the city outside. I wasn't alone. I couldn't see them, but I felt them, figures shifting in the dark, pressing against the edges of my reality. Whispers slithered through the silence, fragments of words that tangled into one. Run! I stumbled to my feet, heart pounding. My instincts screamed at me, to flee, to grab my bag, to throw open the door, to race down the stairs and never look back. But another voice, the quieter, heavier one, told me the truth. There was nowhere left to run. The hum grew louder. The shadows deepened. And then, from the corner of the room, she appeared again. The stranger, me, her eyes hollow, her face pale, her lips trembling. She raised a hand, pointing to the door. Go. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. Where am I supposed to go? Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Only the same gesture toward the door, toward escape. But I understood then. It wasn't about where. It was about choosing. Run, and maybe I would live. Stay, and I would face whatever was coming, even if it destroyed me. The hum reached its peak, rattling the walls, making the glass in the windows tremble. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. And in that moment, I decided. I grabbed my bag, I threw open the door, I ran down the stairs, out into the storm, the rain drenching me instantly. The city looked different, empty, abandoned, every building looming like a corpse. Lightning split the sky, illuminating streets that should have been familiar but felt alien. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have, as though the city itself was hollow. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stop. My lungs burned. My legs screamed, but still I ran. The stranger's voice followed me, not behind, not ahead, but inside, before it's too late. At some point, I collapsed beneath an overpass, gasping for air, my body trembling with exhaustion. I pressed my back against the cold concrete, staring into the shadows that stretched endlessly before me. And there, among the dripping water and the flickering streetlights, I realized the truth. There is no escape, not from destiny. Not from the shadows, not from ourselves. Running wasn't about survival. It was about delay, about buying time, and maybe that's all any of us can ever do. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. By the time I staggered back into the open, the storm had passed. The city stirred with morning light, as though nothing had happened. People went about their lives, blind to the shadows that haunted me. But I wasn't the same. I would never be the same. The warning had changed me. Maybe it had saved me, or maybe it had only ensured I lived long enough to wonder when the end would finally come. And now, the choice is no longer mine, it's yours. Asterisk, asterisk, if you were me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed and faced the unknown, or run into the storm without looking back? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to hear what you would choose. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that will haunt your thoughts long after the video ends. Share this video with someone who believes in signs, and see what they say, because sometimes a warning is not just a warning. Sometimes it's destiny calling your name. Asterisk, asterisk.